I've been living with my girlfriend for about 5 years now, which actually usually gets me a round of applause, to be honest, because I think I'm doing okay. Well, actually, maybe it's her that needs the round of applause more than me for putting up with me for 5 years. But we live in Edinburgh, as you've just been told, and we found a flat. Looked like it was going to do everything it needed to do, this flat. It's a tenement block in the centre of Edinburgh, so built a couple of hundred years ago. Lovely place with these huge high ceilings. And on these huge high ceilings, the biggest problem we had were these horrible fake chandelier things hanging there, like big black metal spiders that were going to drop on your head if you walked underneath them in the dark. They weren't prehistoric, but there was definitely pre-IKEA. You know, we wanted something a little bit more modern, a little bit more up to date. The problem was getting up there to bring them down. I needed a ladder, which is something I've never actually owned before. I never needed a ladder before. When I grew up, it was my mum. My mum did all the DIY around our house. My mum was never happier than when she was surrounded by Black & Deckers and Bosches and power drills, that kind of thing. You didn't buy my mum a bouquet of flowers for Mother's Day. You bought my mum a set of screwdrivers. That was what she wanted. And there's always been a bit of conflict, I think, between what I enjoy and what my mum enjoys. You know, I write stories for a living, and my mum doesn't see that as a very practical thing to do. You know, putting up a shelf, what more does the soul need? You know, wallpapering a room, that can be artistic, can't it? And the fact that I do a lot of my writing, literally I just do a lot of my writing with a pencil. And my mum's like, well, get yourself a propelling pencil at least. You know, they're mechanical, you can do more with them. More than write. No, I'm quite happy with what I've got, thanks. So there's been a bit of friction between what my mother enjoys and what I enjoy. But she knows about ladders and things. So as I was popping down to the local DIY superstore, I thought, I'll phone my mum up, give my mum a ring, you know, ask my mum's advice. And then I thought, well, no, there comes a time in a person's life you've got to step out from the shadow of your mum, at least by your mid-30s. You know, get out there and discover the world by yourself. So I thought, no, I won't phone home. I won't ask for advice. I'll buy this ladder all by myself. I was amazed by how many ladders there actually are on the market, all racked up there. But I found one shiny and new, all nice and silver, and I bought it with my own money, and I took it home. I felt really proud of myself that I'd got this ladder for myself. But it was when I got home that nice feeling of self-worth just kind of drained away. Because I thought that ladders were fairly simple, primitive kind of devices. I thought that for thousands of years, thousands of people have managed to use ladders with little or no instruction whatsoever. But how wrong could I be? It seems to be that over the years, there's been a few unfortunate souls that haven't quite grasped the fundamentals of ladder control. And ladders nowadays come with a full set of instructions. And my 5-step ladder actually comes with 18 steps of instructions, written on one of the legs with this picture, this hieroglyph of a stick man falling to his horrific and untimely death from a height of about 2.5 feet, something like that. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to give you a reading today, if that's okay, and I wanted to share with you my favourite instructions from the side of my ladder. These are genuine instructions I've actually taken from the side of my ladder. And the first one, number one, one out of 18 of this list on the side of the ladder, number one's, it's possibly the wisest, possibly the sagest instruction of all. The first one, it says, do not use the ladder if you tire easily. Well, no, I think that's a good one. I think you need to be fit and healthy to use a ladder. I think you need to have had a good night's sleep the night before, you know, because what happens if you climb to the top of your ladder and you're just too knackered to come back down again? You could be trapped up there for days, couldn't you? You could starve to death at the top of your ladder before anybody finds you. It does go on to say don't use the ladder if under the influence of alcohol, that first one. But directly below that, number 2, it says, do not walk or jog the ladder. I'm not quite sure. I mean, maybe you've ignored that first instruction. You have a bit of a bevy, put a lead on your ladder, go to take it out for a walk in the park. I guess what it means is you're not meant to hop your ladder from one space to the next, you know, while you're up, kind of pogo it across the room. But I was very chuffed. I was very pleased with my ladder at this point. I sort of wanted to phone my mum up and say, hey, Mum, your ladder at home, how fast does yours go? Mine's got twin speed. A bit further down the list, there's do not use the ladder as a shelf. Well, no wonder my book awards keep falling through all those big holes in the middle. You know, I hadn't thought of that one. Perhaps the instruction that winds me up the most, maybe it says more about me than ladders, but the instruction that winds me up the most, a bit further down the list, it says, store the ladder in a safe and dry place. And that really winds me up because doesn't pretty much everything in the known universe need to be stored in a safe and dry place, you know? And we know this. It's why we don't keep cheese in the bath, you know? It's meant to be safe and dry in the fridge. But pretty much everything comes with this label, doesn't it? You know, whether it's clothes or tools or medicine or hamsters or nuclear weapons, pretty much everything needs to be stored in a safe and dry place. And yet we get told this over and over and over again. And I got so fed up of having to read this yet again. I racked my brains for a good couple of hours, trying to think of anything at all that didn't need to be stored in a safe and dry place. And the only thing I could come up with, after a good couple of hours, the only thing I could think of were sharks. Because they're quite happy to be wet and dangerous, aren't they, you know, and at the same time. But I realise you've got to get to instruction number 14. Instruction number 14 out of 18 before you're allowed to put one single toe on the bottom rung of my ladder. And what is instruction number 14? Face ladder when climbing. Below that, it says, keep body centred between side rails, which is a little bit sizist, isn't it? If you're a bit chubby and you poke out at the edges, does that mean you're not actually allowed up? And the last one, number 18 out of 18, it actually says no more than one person allowed on the ladder at a time. So no parties at the top of my 5-step ladder. But you see what I mean? There I thought I was striding out into the big wide world all by myself. Didn't need anybody's advice. Didn't need my mum's advice. And it's the ladder that actually patronises me. It's the ladder that kind of makes me feel small and stupid. How did that happen? You know, it's only a ladder. And I do think, it was like, I just felt like I wasn't trusted to think for myself, you know? I wasn't trusted to know how a ladder works. I certainly wasn't trusted to try and figure out how a ladder works for myself. And I do think a lot of the time we do live in this kind of, this cotton wool, condescending kind of a world where we're just not trusted to think on our own 2 feet. And I don't like being patronised. Who does like being patronised, you know? We don't. And since we're talking about books today, what we're celebrating over the next couple of days, what we're talking about is books. The best books. They must be those books that allow you to think on your own 2 feet. The best books must be those books that allow you to explore for yourself, that allow you to think about issues in your own space. For me, fiction should be freedom to explore. Fiction shouldn't be instructional. I really hope I don't patronise my readers when I'm writing for them. I really hope I don't write ladder stories. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I hope I trust my reader. I hope I do. Of course, me trusting my reader, that means that I trust the reader to be able to think about big, tough issues. Certain of my books do deal with drugs or homelessness, bullying, sex, faith, suicide. Big issues, huge issues that I feel merit honest and open-minded exploration. Not everybody agrees with me. That's kind of why I'm here, I suppose. I wouldn't be invited to talk to you if everybody agreed with me. This gentleman in particular, this gentleman certainly doesn't agree with me. This is a genuine letter I actually received 4 or 5 years ago. Dear Sir, I found the language in your book Warehouse most objectionable. At a time when schools are struggling with literacy standards, do you really have to use language of that sort? I note from the cover that it is unsuitable for younger readers. I am 76. How old do I need to be? Yours sincerely, Mr. A.D. Cartwright. Now, I would love to dismiss Mr. Cartwright as narrow-minded, or maybe at his age a bit out of touch. I'd love to ignore him, but I can't, because Mr. Cartwright could very possibly be a grandfather, and as a grandfather, he's most definitely a gatekeeper. He can block my book. This gatekeeping malarkey, it's all about access, isn't it? It's all about readers accessing books and writers accessing their readers. As you lot know, young people don't access books in the same way that adult readers do. Adult readers are often quite happy to buy their own books, whereas young readers, they often get books given to them as gifts. They get books forced on them in classrooms, or they borrow books from the library. And I may write a book with my ideal reader in mind, and for me, a 13, 14-year-old boy. But before my book actually reaches my ideal reader, before my ideal reader can actually get their hands on my book will be vetted, challenged, confronted at several steps along the way. It will be approved or not by the gatekeepers. First of all, there's the publishers. Of course, every author needs to keep the publishers on side, but unfortunately there are a few publishers out there that are a bit disappointingly timid when it comes to the more provocative children's fiction. There's also the librarians, the vast majority of whom are brilliant, fantastic, hugely knowledgeable and passionate about children's books. But being honest with you, I have met one or two along my journey who do bring a rather private agenda to their public bookshelves. There are teachers. There are teachers who, unfortunately, they have a much more limited knowledge of current children's books, especially. And they often get to choose whether they want to use a title in their classroom or not. And then, of course, there are the grandparents and the parents who, unfortunately, have the least amount of knowledge of children's books, apart from the ones they read when they were younger, the nice ones. But if one of these people, just one of these people, takes the slightest offence at anything I've written, they can close the gate, and my book shall not pass. And my ideal reader, he may never even discover that that book I wrote with him in mind actually exists. So what is it that gatekeepers are looking out for? What is it that gatekeepers are keeping their beady eyes peeled for? What blips on their radar are indecent exocets ready to explode the sweet nature of the nearest unsuspecting youngster? Well, there's the F-bomb, for one. As Mr. Cartwright points out, language is very contentious in the world of children's books. And I admit, yes, I freely admit, in my novel Warehouse, I do use the F word twice in my 68,000-word novel. But I think Mr. Cartwright here, he is maybe showing his age a little bit. I don't think he's taken into account that all language, even profanity, all language evolves. And young people these days, sexual swear words, it doesn't have as much effect on them as it maybe did to their parents. I'm very sorry to say this, but young people these days, they don't give a fuck about the F word. They don't use it to offend each other. They use it to offend their elders. So if I cut that word from my book, for whose sake am I doing the censoring? Am I doing it for my reader, or am I doing it for the gatekeeper? And this brings into clear focus the major dilemma of any YA writer. Do I write honestly about teenage life, about my teenage readers, no matter how distasteful or distressing their life may be? Or do I write a book that perhaps teaches or preaches to them a better way? Many gatekeepers still, unfortunately, believe that all books for young people should be worthy, should be educational, should be instructional. It's a flawed argument, one I'll come back to. But from swearing to sex, here's a topic that's going to get the gatekeepers not just barring the gate, but melting down the key, as I've discovered personally with a book I've been involved with called Losing It. Apologies to those who I've already spoken to about Losing It, but Losing It is an anthology I edited on behalf of Anderson Press in the UK, published in 2010. And Losing It is 8 different authors, 8 original stories, but all revolving around the same subject, which is first sexual experience. And I was invited into a school in Scotland to give a book talk to a group of 15-year-old students. And I'd been booked for about 3 months, I think I'd been booked for. But 2 days, literally 2 days before I was due to appear at the school, I received an email from the librarian asking me not to talk about Losing It. And I emailed back and I said, I promise I won't read from the book. I promise I won't perform the book. But I'd quite like to talk about the book because it's my most recent book and perhaps your students would even appreciate, but no. So I called the school up and I spoke to the head teacher and I said to him, look, I promise it's not a how-to guide. It's not a biology lesson. The authors involved, that some of them, the Carnegie-winning authors. There's a UK Children's Laureate in here. These are established authors who handle this subject matter with great care and sensitivity. But no. The headmaster said to me, well, he read me the blurb on the back of the book. He didn't need to because I'd written it, so I knew what it said. But he said to me, after reading the blurb, he felt the book was unsuitable for his school and for his students. And I said, after reading the blurb, have you not read the stories inside? Maybe if you read the stories inside, you'd realise what we was trying to do, but no. The head said to me, his biggest concern was parental reaction to having this book on the school shelves. I said, what kind of book do you mean? And he read me the blurb again, but it hadn't changed from the first time he'd read it. And there was a little bit of backwards and forwards, and I eventually had to kind of admit defeat, and I said, well, look, maybe it's best if I actually cancel my visit. It seemed incredibly hypocritical of me to talk about all my other books, but pretend this one doesn't even exist, even though they was all written primarily for the same age group. And the head told me, he said he was very disappointed with me indeed, but he agreed with me. And he left the conversation by telling me, and I'll quote him directly on this. He said that they were a Catholic school. And as a Catholic school, we will only teach lessons and give instruction about love and sex from the moral perspective of the Catholic faith. And that hurt. Was he calling me immoral? After our phone conversation, I really wished I'd said to him, the book isn't meant to be an instruction manual. You know, it wasn't written for that purpose. It's not meant to teach lessons. That's not why the book exists. I tried to phone him up to explain this to him, but unfortunately he was too busy to take my call. And I really wished I'd actually asked him about this idea that his biggest concern was parental response. Not once during our conversation had he said to me he was concerned about the students' response. Not once did he talk to me about how the students might be affected by losing it. His main concern was pissed off parents. And I wanted to say to him, I wished I'd asked him, for whose sake was my book banned? And here's the rub. If I was an adult writer, writing for adults, and somebody took offence at something I'd written, I'd get called offensive. I'd get called distasteful. But because I write for young people, I'm often accused of corrupting my readers. It's a strong and dangerous differentiation, I feel. That happened about 2 years ago. In the past 2 years, I've discovered several more schools in Scotland that have banned losing it. Several more Catholic schools, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because it seems, after investigating this, losing it hasn't been banned because of strong language. Losing it hasn't even been banned because it talks about sex, the subject matter. Losing it seems to have been banned because it doesn't conform to a particular set worldview or philosophy. So do these schools only want their students to read books that have been approved, sanctioned, authorised? Yes. Yes, they do. But authorised by whom? Approved by whom? There does seem to be a silent and stealthy censorship when it comes to the world of children's books. Losing it is a little bit of an exception, but in the gatekeeping world, it's very rare you hear the gate go clang. The gate usually eases shut with a whisper. There's plenty more gates that have been closed against my books, I'm sure, that I've never even heard. I never will hear in the future. I believe reading is about learning empathy. Reading is about opening your mind. Reading is about learning to look at the world from a stranger's point of view. All notions that I believe should be front and centre, especially when writing for young people. So am I really standing here saying that some books get banned or censored because they make young people think too much? Are we scared that if young people read the wrong kind of book, they'll not think the way we want them to think? Do we not trust young people who can think for themselves? It's one hell of a conspiracy theory, isn't it? I recommend you look at the American Library Association's list of challenged books. I'm not sure how it works here in Australia. We don't have a similar thing in the UK. But the American Library Association, they publish every year the top 100 books that have been challenged in libraries across America. And it makes for fascinating reading. Bridge to Terabitha, or Betha, by Catherine Paterson. Challenged because death is central to the plot, and also because it encourages disrespect of adults. James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl, challenged because of profanity and that it encourages disrespect of adults. Harriet the Spy by Louise Fitzhugh, challenged because it teaches children to lie, spy, talk back to adults and curse. How to Eat Fried Worms by Thomas Rockwell, challenged because it encourages children to engage in antisocial behaviour, frying worms and then eating them, at a guess. A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein, challenged because it promotes disrespect, and also in particular challenged because one of the illustrations might encourage children to smash plates so that they don't have to dry the dishes. The list goes on, and I'll ask this just one more time. For whose sake would these books be banned? It seems somewhere along the line, some gatekeeper has become concerned that a particular book could undermine their implied authority, or could set a child off on thinking out of the box of their particular sacred worldview, meaning a gate closes, meaning children don't even know these books exist. In all the book protests that I've encountered, the implication seems to be that reading the wrong kind of book can not only corrupt a child's mind, but it can corrupt society as a whole. And if this were true, surely somebody must have spotted the correlation between reading challenged books and criminal behaviour. Surely our prisons must be spilling over with the grown-up readers of banned books. It seems the opposite is true. I am yet to hear of a convicted criminal who, with a heavy heart, acknowledges that his unlawful behaviour is in direct correspondence with reading James and the Giant Peach. I've got some statistics for you. UK National Literacy Trust in 2008 conducted a survey, and they discovered 70% of pupils who have been permanently excluded from school have difficulties in basic literacy standards. And 25% of young offenders have reading skills below the average of below that of an average 7-year-old. These young people, they'd struggle to read any kind of book, never mind a challenging one. Young people deserve good books. Young people deserve the best books. What are the best books? Well, they're not ladder stories, are they? And who are the best gatekeepers? I'd argue it's the readers themselves. I don't think we give young people enough credit for their skills at self-editing. And I do apologise, my talk is swinging wildly between the personal and the professional here. But I grew up in a house without books. When I go back to my parents, there's still very, very few books in there. My mum's got her DIY magazines that she gets for her birthday. My dad's got a motorbike maintenance manual somewhere. And there's one small shelf, just one small shelf of fiction. And every book on that shelf, I've written. And they're all in perfect, pristine, mint condition, first edition. Because they're unread, because my parents don't read. I'm sure they're very proud of what I do. I mean, my mum, she was the one who put the shelf up, don't forget. But my parents, even though they don't really get what I do, they've always realised how important books are and how important reading is. They were desperate to get my brother and I, they were desperate to get us reading. I didn't get into reading until I was in my teenage years. But once I did, I read everything. I read widely. I read exhaustively. The thing was, because my mum didn't really know about books, because she didn't read, she couldn't really choose my books for me. She couldn't police my choices. So did I read books that made me want to swear or have sex or disrespect my elders? I didn't need to read books for that. I was a teenager. They were top of my list of priorities anyway, you know? It was my mates at school. They taught me all that stuff, not books. What I did need books for, I did need to be taught empathy. I was a selfish teenager. I needed to be taught how other people view the world. I needed to be taught respect for the man who lived next door and for the family in a different culture that lived over the ocean. That's what I needed books for. And I needed books to maybe explore difficult issues, because fiction itself was a safety net. If I could explore these issues from the safety of a novel, I had the safety net that it was fictional. If only real-world issues could be closed as easily as a book. Before I finish, I ought to mention age banding, age certification on the back of books like video games or like movies. It's once again raised its ugly head in the UK. And maybe Mr. Cartwright would be very happy with it. He'd know then how old he needs to be to read one of my books. But it is something that actually in the UK, the vast majority of UK authors, we've fought very hard against. Because we feel that number on the back of a book, that's just another gatekeeper by proxy. I believe that young people should be allowed access to books that even we as adults might find the subject matter unpalatable. If young people have to grow up in a world where there is bullying, racism, sex, suicide, terrorism, then do we really want to ban them from gaining any knowledge of these kind of subjects? And maybe if they're allowed to read about these kind of subjects within the safety of a novel, it's going to help them get their head around those difficult issues before they might have to, unfortunately, face them in real life. Real life situations don't always come with age certification, do they? What we want, all of us here, what we're all here for these 2 days, we want the next generation to read. Why do we want the next generation to read? Because we know that people who read, well, they're usually cleverer, wittier, more open-minded, and nicer than people who don't read. It's what's so lovely about being amongst you lot, all you clever, witty, open-minded, just downright nice people. That's what we want. That's what we want to pass on. So I'm saying, I suppose my big message is trust the reader. Trust the reader. Because I do worry sometimes that maybe we're a little bit overprotective with our young readers. And we really don't want to get into a situation where we're actually committing a disservice to the next generation under the guise of protection. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.